Good morning delegates, good morning everybody. We'll get some, that's wee Annie's voice I can hear in the middle. Welcome to, yes Annie, Eden Court in Inverness, the Highland capital for ALBA Party Spring Conference 2023, and to pipe in, our party leader, also deputy leader, and our Westminster leader, Scotland's champions. Please welcome Piper Mearns. Thank you very much indeed to the wonderful Piper Mearns. And first of all, some housekeeping. There are no drills planned, so if we hear alarms, we should exit the building in an orderly fashion. The Wi-Fi code you may have, I've been reliably informed by the party leader, who was clearly trying to find a better connection, not sure what he was researching, that the best Wi-Fi is under the name EC Conference, and the password, somewhat interestingly, is Empire with a capital E 18. Now, I'm delighted to have so many of you here in person for our conference. In fact, all the seats are sold out to debate an extremely full agenda, and there's a lot to look forward to today: speeches, motions, music, and tonight's Highland Hoolie. And a very special welcome to those of you watching online on the live stream. There will be a brief period when we'll go off live stream for an internal session, but we'll be as quick as possible so you can enjoy all of today. And to our delegates here today, remember to get your speakers' cards in as quickly as possible and hand them to our superbly efficient ALBA stewards. And let's give them a round of applause already for the day they have ahead. Now, I'm going to be especially strict on timings today. You know how long you're allowed to speak for, and if you deliberately don't make eye contact with me, I'm just going to come and stand in front of you. You have been warned. Now, delegates, ALBA is indeed in fine form. The latest survey poll out just this week, it gave us a breakthrough, actually. It's a third opinion survey in a month showing our party on course to win seats in the Scottish Parliament, and it's the first time that ALBA has actually registered in a survey poll. Now, it puts us at a breakthrough 6% in the yes city of Glasgow, where most importantly, yes is at 60% in that poll. Isn't that absolutely fantastic? And it's a great boost in the wake of the amazing All Under One banner rally at Glasgow Green last Saturday, and it was wonderful to speak to so many people from across the movement. And if you missed it, be sure to watch back online via the Indie Live platform. Another wonderful independent supporting group, Indie Live. Please do support them. And of course, you'll be able to see ALBA well represented with rousing speeches from, of course, our party leader, Alex Salmond, and Highland's very own and newlywed, Hector MacLeod. Alex, I don't know if you know, but Hector's lovely new wife is also called Alex. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. You might hear more from that later. Anyway, we have now completed, delegates, 54 ALBA book public meetings. That's one almost every single week since we launched the book. And these public meetings, organised by the wonderful Denise Findlay, have taken us up and down the country. And it's been inspiring and uplifting to meet with so many people on our travels and answer their questions on independence. Alex Salmond has also been busy and on the telly a lot of late. And this Thursday you're in for a special treat because you will see him on BBC Question Time from Fort William. Now, ALBA rightly have a wee spring in our step, and we are the party with the plan to get the independence cause moving forward and back once again on the front foot. And yes, delegates, our membership is rising, and of course we declare our membership to ALBA Conference and the Electoral Commission. So I'm delighted to announce that our membership is now approaching 7,500, with well over 1,000 members joining just since the turn of the year. Now, the alert members among you will note that that means we have now overtaken both the Liberals and the Tories, and we're setting our sights on Labour's branch office in Scotland. It also means, of course, that we are fast closing in on the Greens, and I am confident that by autumn conference we will have become Scotland's second biggest independence party. But what's most important about all of that is this. We are a party of activists, experienced and committed activists, independence activists. In fact, every one of us is a first activist. What that means is that every new member of ALBA means another activist for our national cause. That, and only that, should be our driving force for our membership. We have a responsibility to regain independence in the here and now and deliver it in the lifetimes of many stalwarts of our great movement and lifelong campaigners, the giants upon whose shoulders we stand and respect, we don't forget. Not least the person I have the privilege to now introduce to you all. He turns 99 this year and is going to give us all a proper Highland welcome on behalf of ALBA Highland Lacu. Delegates, please join me in welcoming lifelong activist and independent supporter, Willie McRobbie. We're going to keep clapping till you get here, Willie.
Just in case the memory goes. Faaltje. Als je gefaaltje nog reduce you on the can in the Gael, go doing the Gael. We welcome you to the land of the Gael and the language of the Gael. Unfortunately, the language is slowly dying. But we look forward to the day when we have Scotland regains her independence. And we have a new Parliament in Edinburgh that will do what they can, hopefully, to revive the language, the music and the culture of the Gael. But today we're here for the conference of the ALBA Party. And I will ask you to give a good, strong Highland welcome to our leader, Alex Salmond.
So I'm going to ask Willie to stay on stage because Alex would like to say a few words. Alex.
Yes, well, good morning, delegates. Now, I met this man here a couple of years ago when we were launching ALBA. I said to him, because he told me he was a piper, you see, he piped for the Legion for many, many years. So I unwisely said to Willie, when did you stop piping? And he looked at me with a fairly steely gaze and said, I haven't stopped piping. Admittedly, he doesn't do the marching and piping at the same time, but frankly, I couldn't do that anyway. I couldn't do the speaking and the marching at the same time. But he does still play the small pipes. And he asked me to mention this because if any of you have anniversaries or weddings coming up, fairly small dues, and looking for a piper at reasonable rates, then Willie is undoubtedly your man. And incidentally, experienced pipers, well, we piped in with the wonderful piper Alistair Mearns, who piped us in with Freedom Come All Ye. Willie, of course, whispered to me, originally, the burning sands of Egypt, because originally it was a military tune, turned into Freedom Come All Ye by the great Hamish Henderson, and wonderfully piped by Alistair bringing us in. He got the nod of approval from the master here on my left. Now, listen, Willie, this is going to be a surprise. It's not This Is Your Life, you'll be delighted to know, but what it is honorary life membership of the ALBA party.
Oh, I'll save a pound or two.
And it's with great pleasure that as ALBA leader, I announce that Willie McRobbie is an honorary life member. Unfortunately, he was a member already, so that doesn't help us in our mission to overtake the Greens. But nonetheless, I can't think of anyone more deserving than you, Willie, to be our latest honorary life member.
Thank you. I'll leave it to you now.
That's it. And now I'll hand the conference back into the safe hands of our party chair, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. And I'm now going to hand over the chair to Deputy Leader Kenny McCaskill to enable me to deliver the conference report.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks to all members and LACUs who submitted motions, and thanks especially to the conference committee members who absolutely deserve a mention. So I'm going to mention who makes up the conference committee members as elected by you. Gail Hendry, Fiona Sinclair, Hector MacLeod, Jeff Bush, Abdul Majid, David Henry, Eva Comrie, Dr Yvonne Ridley, Jackie Bister, Daniel Jack and Alan Peachy. Thank you very much indeed for your service to the party and indeed this conference. Delegates, we received 26 motions, 2 which were carried over from National Council, which took place in Ayr Town Hall on the 11th of February. 11 motions were selected by the Conference Committee, and they made today's agenda ambitious in terms of getting through all the business, including topical motions. But if we stick to timings, we shall triumph. Accordingly, on behalf of the Conference Committee, which I'm very, very proud to chair, I request that Spring Conference accept our report and duly adopt our agenda. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So we now move to our internal session. So for those of you watching on live stream, you've got time to go away for a quick cup of tea while we switch off the live stream and move to an internal session, which we will start with in the General Secretary's report. This is also an opportunity to ask questions of any of the office bearers, all of whom are in attendance today. General Secretary. Thank you very much. welcome back to those of you watching online. You missed yourselves. You've had a lot of fun there, but welcome back. Lovely to have you to our open session. And we're going to start with a short video. Thank you.
We are hostages in a union that denies democracy. It is completely unacceptable. It has to be challenged. It will be challenged, and we will do that.
So today I invite others to sign the Declaration of St Andrew's Day. We the people, elected members and civic organisations of Scotland, assert that our nation has the right of self-determination to freely determine our political status and to freely pursue our economic and cultural and social development. Mindful of the Scottish constitutional tradition of the sovereignty of the people, we will democratically challenge any authority or government which seeks to deny us that right.
Firstly, that the power to legislate for a referendum requires a democratic mandate from the Scottish public to do so. Secondly, this bill states that no such referendum may be held sooner than 7 years after any previous such referendum.
This would be a time when, if anybody wishes to oppose the 10-minute rule motion, that they should indicate now. They haven't done so, so I am now going to put the question. And the question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As may have that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Kenny McCaskill, Joanna Cherry, Angus Brendan McNeill, Douglas Chapman, Margaret Ferrier and myself.
Mr. Neil Hanby.
This is not a time for giving up. This is the time to push forward. Scotland's future in Scotland's hands was the key message in 2014. We didn't say Scotland's future was going to be in the Supreme Court's hands, that Scotland's future was going to be in the hands of Tory Prime Ministers. We said it was for the people to decide.
So delegates, the gentleman to my left, our party leader, told me and has said on occasion that the speech made by our next speaker in Parliament when presenting his motion was perhaps one of the best parliamentary speeches of all time in Westminster. Please welcome the excellent parliamentary group leader for the ALBA party at Westminster, Neil Hanby.
Oh, well, that was unexpected. Very nice, though. Thanks very much for the welcome, guys. Oh, call me old-fashioned, but I believe that politicians and political parties should stand for something. I hope you'd expect me to have an opinion and argue my case robustly and constructively. I also hope you believe that I am not above criticism, I'm human and subsequently fallible. And I hope and I believe that you welcome the exchange of ideas and debate, and while we might not agree on everything, there is room for difference on opinion, and beyond certain red lines, there is always space for compromise. But at the moment, we are experiencing an unbelievable polarisation in politics. From Brexit, where those who voted leave in England and we voted remain in Scotland. On independence, we say democracy and they say no. But on independence, there is another polarisation between parties. But last weekend, we demonstrated, without any question or doubt, that for the parties of Scotland to unite under one banner is absolutely possible, and we shared a problem at a festival ideas in Glasgow last weekend, and it was a tremendous success. Now, when it comes to uniting the movement, the UK Supreme Court's decision last year is worthy of a constitutional battle. But the gender recognition reform, with limited support in Scotland, is not a matter for a constitutional rammy. As Alec encapsulated this position so clearly, self-determination must come before self-identification. And that's not the only challenge in this legislation. Kenny has done a huge amount of work in Westminster challenging the position on transgender prisoners, even before Adam Bryson was a thing. We've challenged food and fuel poverty in Scotland and across the UK. Kenny has done tremendous work on the standing charge and the inequity of prepayment meters to great effect and effected meaningful change. He's also pursued the issue of offshore health and safety in an adjournment debate that really encapsulated the great risks to our people in the offshore wind industry. And both of us have continued to pursue the connectivity of Scotland with Europe, with new ferry connections out of Rosyth and indeed in the west coast from Inverclyde down to Bilbao. These are really important issues for us to begin the work on now, because they prepare us for our case for independence. There are helpful arguments to negotiate with the UK government. The resilience that's required for the port of Dover and how busy it has become. The environmental footprint of lorries rolling up and down the M1 between Scotland and England. And the environmental issues are key government commitments north and south of the border. But the block is not Alistair Jack. The block is not the Department of Transport. The block is the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government are not listening to our pleas to build this necessary infrastructure. They're not listening to myself or to Kenny or even to Douglas Chapman. And that is a problem. In terms of other issues that I've been pursuing locally, radioactive contamination in Dalgety Bay has been something I've been pursuing, as with the radiation incident in the UK nuclear weapons port on the west coast. The government hope it gets lost in the chaos and churn of different ministers as they flip from one prime minister to the next. But we are persisting, and again this week I'll be raising questions about these issues in Parliament. Other issues you might have heard about, and there's a bit of a hint a moment ago, but we put forward the St Andrew's Day Declaration in Parliament. There is nothing contentious for any independence-supporting Member of Parliament in those words. There is no mention of a political party, only of the cause of independence and the people of Scotland. And as with the Self-Determination Bill, I was delighted to have support from friends in the SNP for that legislation. But I'm left with a question. Who wouldn't want to support these words or our ambition for Scotland? If you're serious about independence, why would you not support those initiatives? We, Kenny and I, are not the ones refusing common cause. We've also challenged international scandals with a perspective looking at the atrocities and the profiteering from war in the Yemen. And we continue to challenge Tory political and economic dominion over Scotland. In 2014, we were told that the energy bounty in Scotland would be a curse for the poor old Scots had we chosen independence. Now it props up His Majesty's Treasury to the tune of £80 billion a year. And the Scottish Government are replicating the grand folly of contracts for difference that Westminster made on oil and gas with the same kind of proposals for renewables. And all of this matters Kenny has done some tremendous research, which both of us have pressed the UK government on. In Scotland, we use between 4 to 6 terawatts or billion kilowatt hours of energy per year. At the moment, we give 35 billion kilowatt hours per year to England for free. By 2030, that will increase to 122 billion kilowatt hours of energy going to England free of charge while our people are cold and hungry, and we are the only ones standing up to the UK government on this issue. It's simply unacceptable. And the benefits of the UK's welfare state don't even provide the basics, not even for those in in-work poverty. The explosion of need for food banks across the UK is an absolute scandal. And they are now experiencing an inability to contain their costs. In Scotland, food poverty is a real issue. And at the moment, £1,356,540.35 is owed to local authorities for school meals. The First Minister questions the need for universalism based on his own prosperity. Whatever happened to the gains of devolution? Others in his party are questioning the need for free prescriptions, free further education. They cannot be open to difficult discussions. They underpin everything the independence movement stands for. And today I'm calling for that school meal debt to be written off for over 20,000 children whose parents are clearly struggling, and a fresh commitment from the First Minister to protect the universalism that defines a civilised, well-being society. Let's up our party's campaign to eradicate poverty and call for free school meals for all Scotland's children here today at our ALBA Party Spring Conference. It's all about priorities. And talking of priorities, the only time that I will work with Westminster Tories or Labour is when we open negotiations for independence. If the purpose of the SNP was to prop up any Westminster government, I can assure you I would never have joined in the first place. Change can only come when Scotland becomes an independent country, and that ends the poverty forced upon our people for generations in the past and protects them well into the future. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. Before we move to our top motion, which of course is independence as it should be, can I just remind delegates of the fringes at lunchtime? One fringe to be held in here, actually relevant to Morgan's internal motion, is about becoming an ALBA party candidate, and that will be led by Denise Finlay and Jackie Bister. So you've got a treat in store if you're interested in standing for ALBA, and the other fringe meeting is in a meeting room outside by Christians for Independence, led by Dave Thompson. All very welcome, so please take some time to attend if you can. So we now move to an independence convention, motion to be proposed by the National Executive Committee, to be spoken to on the National Executives Committee on behalf by Neil Hanvey, and to be seconded by a variety of people who will be led by Brian Topping. But first, welcome back to propose the Independence Convention motion, Neil Hanvey.
Okay, folks, remembered my water this time, which is definitely a bonus. Okay, conference. Things change. Since we last met, things have most certainly changed. But some things stay the same. And I don't know about you, but I've never, ever been confused about the reason I got involved in politics in the first place. was to build a better future for our people through the gateway of independence for our country. Returning to the Eden Court Theatre today reminds me of many happy days where the constitutional ambition of the SNP was clear and the primary purpose certain. But in 2019, confidence about that purpose was shaken by events and rocked by the diminishing ambition beyond the bold, empty proclamations in Westminster's death chamber. Intervening years have led me down a road I never thought it would be necessary to travel, that we never thought it would be necessary to travel. Yet here we are. The choices that I have made are regrettable, not because they were wrong, but because they were necessary. Since 2015, we have sent Scottish MPs to Westminster with a clear mission: to deliver independence for Scotland. I believed and still believe in that mission, but my hand is forever outstretched in friendship and common cause to anyone who shares that ambition. But when those intentions are ignored and dismissed, it is not a slight on me or even the ALBA party. It's a dismissal of the aspirations of our people for a normal, independent future. This motion recognises that with deep regret, the campaign for independence has not been advanced since 2014, and that much of the Scottish Government's work for independence is yet to be completed, and, importantly, other work by groups such as the SSRG, Tim Rideout's group, Robin McAlpine and others has largely been ignored. There is no urgency for independence coming from the SNP Green Coalition in the Holyrood Parliament. And in moving this motion today as a conference, we affirm our commitment to independence as an immediate priority for Scotland, to continue our policy work in preparation for that independent Scotland, to proclaim Scotland's sovereign claim of right to determine our future as agreed at ALBA Party's conference in 2022 and encapsulated by my Scotland Self-Determination Bill. Conference, I therefore ask you to support our call for. I'm sorry that I'm detailing this from the resolution, but it's important that we make this explicit. We call for the immediate establishment of a new independence convention, a convention to create the blueprint for and devise the route to an independent Scotland. To put that into effect, we are willing, absolutely willing, to cooperate with other independence parties to stand for election as Scotland United on a joint mandate to initiate independent negotiations with Westminster. It's time to bring together key representatives for political, civic and independence groupings to establish the way forward to independence for Scotland. With courage, conviction and determination, our number is growing and our arguments, our strengthening. It's time. Support the resolution.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. I now call Brian Topping to second the motion. And just before you speak, Brian, I have a card in against from Hugh Kerr. Hugh, I'll need a seconder from the floor to allow you to speak against the motion, or can somebody just volunteer? I'm keen to encourage debate. Anyone keen to second? Yes, thank you very much indeed. OK, so Brian, you'll be followed by Hugh, who has a seconder from the floor, to be followed by Hector MacLeod. Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, Conference. I am delighted to second the motion. From day one, ALBA has called for an independence convention to be established. Sadly, up till now, the SNP have failed to establish one, despite the many mandates they have been given by the good people of Scotland. Recently, the new First Minister has said he wants to initiate SNP-only regional discussions group. I ask you, the SNP will be talking with and to themselves. Unbelievable. ALBA is leading the way when it comes to collaborative working. We have held over 50, in fact 54, I believe, wee ALBA boot meetings, the length and breadth of Scotland, making contact with many grassroots organisations. All of those meetings were packed out with members of the public keen to hear the case for an independent Scotland. Ably put forward by our fantastic leader, Alex Salmond. The wee ALBA boot meetings have endeavoured to be inclusive, ensuring that we hear from people from across the Yes movement and across all walks of life. We have heard from many speakers at these meetings, including our leader Alex Salmond, Neil Hanvey, Ken McCaskill, Alex Neil and Jim Sillars. I would like to thank all of these people and also Tasmina for chairing all those meetings so well. The Independence Convention should provide Scotland with a blueprint for the route to an independent Scotland. ALBA is willing to cooperate and work with other independence parties to stand for election, as Neil had said, as Scotland United on a joint mandate to initiate independence negotiations. Accordingly, the ALBA party will move to support the setting up of a new independence convention with immediate effect, bringing together key representatives from political, civic and independence groupings to establish the way forward in regaining independence for Scotland. I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Brian, I now call Hugh Kerr to speak against the motion. Hugh.
Thank you, Tasmina. I knew it was the only way you'd let me speak, of course, as to indicate against motion. In general, I'm actually...
I have to stop presupposing my actions before I take the view, and it will go fine.
Long experience. In general, I'm very sympathetic to the motion. ALBA is the pro-independence party. We've demonstrated that in the past 2 years. As you know, I've been in a few political parties, and I have to think about strategy. I think the strategy is a good one. We should certainly call for an independence convention, but we should be prepared for it not happening, because that's the truth of the situation, I think. I think the realistic perspective we have to think is that actually the SNP's actions over the past few years have set the independence movement back probably a generation. We have to think of the longer term, and I'm 78, so I might not be around in the longer term, but actually the longer term really means that ALBA has to take over from the SNP as the pro-independence party in Scotland. I think it will, but I think it will take time. It takes time, for example, to rehabilitate Alec. Alec was trounced in the press despite his victory in the courts, but in the last few weeks, actually, he has become rehabilitated. People are taking notice of him, and when they see him, they can see a giant compared to the pygmies of the SNP or all the other parties around. We have got 18 months until the next general election. As I said in the earlier debate, I think ALBA should be up there and prominent, but not with a view to go to Westminster, a view to actually settle up with Westminster, not to settle down as the SNP MPs have done, and drawing their pensions and looking happy there. They're going to be very unhappy, I can tell you, because at least half of them are going to lose their seats at the next general election. I think we have to prepare for the longer strategy, and the longer strategy is actually we don't need a referendum, we don't need the consent of Westminster, we need to assert the right that Scotland is an independent nation and that we will take the decision, and almost certainly it will be a decision taken by the Scottish Parliament, which hopefully ALBA and other pro-independence forces will take in the future, which says actually we declare our independence, we go to the United Nations, we show that actually we represent the majority of the people in Scotland, and that should be built into our strategy. Now, you may think I'm being a little pessimistic, and of course, you know, pessimism is as important as optimism, but I say it's realism to think of that strategy. But hopefully that's something that can be encompassed within the convention and within the processes of the party. Certainly we should try for the independence convention. hope to get as many people as possible behind it, but be prepared that actually there are a lot of people out there who do their best to spike the idea of an independence convention, not least the SNP. So I shall be optimistic and hope that it succeeds. And in the spirit of party unity, I will withdraw my opposition.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Hugh. Your card has been marked. We're now at, I'm not even going to give you 3 strikes on your right, you're at 2 and you've been warned. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution, nonetheless, well intended and well received. I now call Hector MacLeod to speak in favour of the motion to be followed by Denise Findlay, who will be followed by Jeff Bush. Hector, newlywed Hector MacLeod.
Conference, if ever there was a time for action on independence, it must be now. And if ever there was a time to have an independence convention to devise the strategy for that action, it also needs to be now. Conference, in leading up to 2014, I believe it was right to have the one party leading the strategy and campaign for independence, not least because we had someone who actually knew what they were doing in Alex Salmond, but also because the strategy to get a referendum was clear, as was the case we had for independence. Now we find ourselves in a very different situation to 2014 altogether. The case for independence hasn't been updated to fall in line with where we are presently by the party who are in government to fight and win that case. For the last number of years, the strategy to get a referendum has been to keep doing the same thing and hoping for different outcomes, and asking for it and being told no. Conference, the Westminster establishment, no matter who is in government, will continue to say no, because they know there is a very, very high chance they will lose it the next time. But Conference, a positive change from 2014 is, of course, we now have parties like our ALBA party who are preparing a case, who are preparing strategies, who are doing the legwork. And we are not alone. There are other independent supporting parties, as well as organisations and groups who have been doing a tremendous amount of work. This is why we need the Independence Convention called immediately, to combine all the ideas, strategies, proposals to the new case for independence and form them into a strategy and case that will see us move forward to win and reclaim our independence. One of these strategies might be, as this motion suggests, fighting the next election as Scotland United with a mandate to begin negotiations. Conference, we should support such a strategy, as our party's priority is to reclaim independence, and this would seem a strong strategy to do so. Of course, getting this agreed by the parties is only the first step. It would be a big first step, but nonetheless a first step. The next task will be to get people and the voters behind it in support. Recent polls have been good for independence support, but haven't been so good for transferring that support to winning independent supporting seats at the next election. Conference, the convention being called and voters seeing that it's not just election talk, but we are united for independence, we mean action, and a vote for a Scotland United candidate will not be to go cap in hand asking Westminster for favours, it will be to begin the negotiations of Scotland's demand to leave the UK and become a normal independent nation. I am personally in no doubt would see Scotland return a majority of Scotland United candidates. So Conference, please support this motion and reaffirm the ALBA Party's commitment to making our contribution to the Convention and our contribution to reclaiming our independence as a priority at every election. Support the motion.
Thank you, Hector. I now call Denise Findlay, who will be followed by Jeff Bush, who will be followed by David Henry, all to speak in favour of the motion. Denise, welcome.
So I believe things can change and change very fast. And we've seen examples from history that things change fast. So there's no reason to believe that today we have to wait a very long time for independence. We're going to have 2 chances in the next 3 years, a chance in 24 and a chance in 26. In the past 8 or 9 years, I believe that had the independence movement been led correctly, we would be independent today. because the people would vote for independence. They would have voted for independence. And when they get a chance, they will vote. Our problem is the people of Scotland have not been given the chance to vote for independence for 9 years, and they've wanted to. So our job is to give them the chance to vote for independence. And from this motion, so the first point is we need to be able to present a new perspective, and that's what we've been doing with the Wee ALBA book, which is the new case for independence and reflects many of our policies that we've created over the last few years. And that will come about with the Constitutional Convention, because they can put these policies into a sort of white paper that we had in 2014 that people can get behind. And then the other thing is to give people the opportunity to vote with a manifesto that says a vote for us is a vote to start immediate negotiations for independence. And we can do that from Scotland United. If the SNP MPs and party and the other independence parties unite with us and we form Scotland United, in 24 people can have the opportunity that they've been wanting for so long to vote for independence, and they will vote for independence. And if the SNP turn that opportunity down, we will have the opportunity in 26 to vote for independence. So we need to work hard. What we have to do is work hard and put everything into getting an independence vote at the next opportunity. Thank you, Conference, and please support the motion.
Thank you, Denise. I now call Jeff Bush to be followed by David Henry, and our final speaker will be Sean Davis. Jeff, welcome.
Good morning, Conference. I'm here to support the motion as put forward by the NEC, and in particular to support the commitment on ALBA's part to continue to develop our policies on routes to achieve independence. The original motion that David Henry and myself submitted was very specific, but perhaps a little bit too prescriptive and limiting for the current situation. But amongst its elements were these following two. First was a complete repudiation of the Section 30 process, which I think is both risk-free, as it simply is not going to happen, and helps put clear water between ALBA policy and SNP policy. Second is an assertion. Second was an assertion by the sovereign Scottish people at the next Holyrood election that the Scottish Parliament is the only Parliament to which they lend their sovereignty, thus converting the Scottish Parliament from a devolved creature of Westminster into the sovereign Parliament of the people of Scotland. I'd like to think that ALBA's policy on gaining independence will quickly become a three-stage process, where at each stage the stakes are raised in order to increase the pressure for independence, maybe something along those lines. First stage is to repudiate the Section 30 process for all sorts of practical and strategic reasons, the most important being that it informs Westminster that we're not playing that game anymore. Second stage, as Denise mentioned, is at the next Westminster general election to join with other independence parties and gain a majority of Scottish seats based on a mandate to commence independence negotiations, which the Westminster government will surprisingly find reasons to ignore and once again deny the democratic will of the Scottish people. Third stage is to raise the stakes again in the face of continued democracy denial on Westminster's part, and effectively cooperate with other independence parties at the next Holyrood election to achieve a supermajority. This time the mandate is essentially about converting the Holyrood Parliament and declaring independence, having gained the support of the international community along the way. That's how I envisage our policy on independence might evolve,
Meanwhile, please support the motion as a positive step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeff. And I admitted to read out what your expertise was on this motion, and I love it so much. And I think people should all use it. Jeff has said his expertise on this motion is deep knowledge and modesty. A lesson there for many in frontline politics. Now, our next speaker to speak in favour of the motion is David Henry, to be followed by Sean Davis, and a card which I missed, but I will take because it's from our honorary member, Moira Brown. But first we hear from David Henry, who's going to demonstrate how he has learned to keep to time since I last saw him. David.
Conference. Pleasure to speak to you about this subject, which is quite close to my heart. Me and Jeff have one thing in common, other than being in the ALBA party, and that is we're both members of the panel of SSRG. SSRG has held over 100 meetings with experts and academics, and some politicians, including SNP politicians. During these meetings, we discovered some very interesting facts. One, we discovered that the Scottish nation first became a nation in 892 AD under the King of MacDonald, and I famously made them all laugh by saying I didn't think there was burger joints in 892. Anyway. We also, as part of our team at the very early stage, had one of the authors of the Scotland Act 1998 give us a full history of Scotland and all the key dates that are very important and how we came to where we are now. He didn't like it too much when we sort of rubbished his homework, but we did. The next Scottish election can be turned into what I think some people have described as a plebiscite election. And this is something we've also discovered. The Scottish Parliament is a creation of Westminster. It doesn't exist without the Scotland Act 1998. However, it does exist separately from that at a Scottish election. The people of Scotland at the next Scottish election have the power to vote for a party such as ALBA, that is saying that you are voting for this party and this party will lend your sovereignty to the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Parliament only, immediately making the Scotland Act a blank piece of paper and Westminster no longer exists. So if you want independence, first of all, ALBA needs to have its policy in place. We do need to work with all the other parties, and we need to get the message out that your next major opportunity to change everything without ever having to ask Westminster for permission again is the next Scottish election. And I hope to see all of you at our SSRG conference in a couple of months, where these issues will be discussed. Thank you.
First class, David. David will be followed by Sean Davis, who will be followed by Moira Brown. Sean. Welcome, Sean.
Conference. I must admit, Inverness is beautiful. It's been the first time we've been here, and I tell you, it's been a warm welcome as well. I had many alcoholic beverages last night, and it was a bit rough. I'm going to say this brief. I'm not here to diminish the SNP. I think they're doing that themselves. But 10 minutes away from here is a battlefield, Culloden. And all clans stood together for Scotland in that day, even though they didn't like each other. Right, so this is going to be brief, and it's a message. We need an independence convention, and we need it now. But the SNP, can you put country before party? Because we can put country before party. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I'd now like to call the wonderful Moira Brown to the stage, and Moira will be followed. Well, I'll come to that because I need to speak to you a bit in terms of the Constitution. So, Moira Brown, where are you, Moira? Big welcome for Moira, honorary member.
You take nothing from fear, but who cares? Hello, delegates. Lovely to be here. I was at my first ever political conference in a church hall behind here, and there was only between 50 and 100 delegates. That was in the 1950s. So look at this party now. But as for going forward, I trust that whatever decision is made in the vote, we look at those who have put together the motion for this convention. The only thing I would say about getting all together, no matter what your priority must be independence for Scotland. Forget our other little hobby horses or the tendency to ream it back for further fine-tuning. That's what that other party that I belong to did do with monotonous regularity. Ream it back. Now, I haven't met all the members here. Obviously, I've known Alec for a long while. Kenny, indeed, through football. And I have listened to others. Chris McElhinney, of course, no. But I trust them. Let's not get into the habit of ream it, but also say to those parties, forget your very important hobby horses, your individual interest. Your interest must be, first of all, in seeking independence for Scotland. And I'm going to have a wee drive, and hey, I've got some temerity in doing so. Alec, you were a wee bit unkind about your symbolism when the First Minister walked behind the stone and you referred to him as being like a poodle. Well, your analogy was a wee bit tenuous there, if I be so bold, because after all, poodles have got a spine and a backbone. I first thought of independence in that wonderful place, Coatbridge, and it was due to the head of the history department refusing to take the red blinkers from before his eyes. And he mentioned the composition of that wonderful institution down south. And my first question to him was, is Scotland and its affairs so unimportant that we can only have 1 hour discussion or concentration, so-called? Once, in that place that I detest south of the border. Ask them for nothing. You may ask, but you'll never get. The only thing that they'll give you is when a budget comes up, is another sop to keep people quiet and away from the fact that what is needed is concentration on Scotland and the Scots, or those that wish to come here and be part of it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, sorry, I've gone on long enough and rattled on, so support the convention, the set-up of a convention of parties who regard the priority independence before anything else. Thank you.
I've had some late cards in, which I'll accept, given it's our top motion and independence is what we're here for. But my next speaker is Craig Murray. He's going to speak against the motion. Craig. Were you drinking with Sean last night, or whoever it was? Welcome, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I have to reorient myself to being here. I literally just arrived in Inverness, having spent the last week picketing an Israeli weapons factory in Leicester. And I should say, if the things the motion proposals come to pass, I will support them absolutely. I will help try to get them, and I will participate in them. I should be delighted to take part in an independence convention with all other parties, and I should be delighted if the SNP has a sudden conversion to the cause of independence and is there too. But the truth is, I've seen quite a lot in the last few weeks of how far the SNP is prepared to cooperate with genuine independence supporters, and the truth is it isn't very much. And I think we have to change our minds. But in changing their minds, we have to send out the right signal. And when you deal with people like that, the signal cannot all be about love and comradeship. You have to say to them things like this. If you stand against Kenny McCaskill and Neil Hanvey at the next election, we will stand against you. You cannot be walked over. I've discussed this with a number of people in the SNP, and none of them believe that the leadership are liable to agree to give ALBA party candidates a free run. We have to make plain that's not acceptable. And I have a great difficulty. I actually don't really regard the SNP anymore as an independence party. I view the SNP as a devolutionist party. ALBA is the independence party. And am I prepared at the next general election to say to people, please vote for Kirsten Oswald, please vote for Alan Smith, please vote for Stuart MacDonald, and pretend I believe that's a vote for independence, because nobody here believes that's a vote for independence. So, let's give it a try. Let's say to them, we all want independence. You say you want independence. Now's your chance to prove it. Prove it and join with us, and we will fight with you. Betray us, betray independence, and we will fight against you. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. I now call Charlie Abel, who's going to speak in favour of the motion. Charlie, of course, fought a brilliant by-election campaign in Dice, and even better was that he was brave and bold enough to take on Nigel Farage, and you did us proud. Charlie Abel, welcome.
Hi, folks. Well, I take on board a lot of the points that have been made already. A lot of them are ones I agree with, and I also agree with Hugh with some of the things he was saying. But if we are going to be looking at a referendum or not, but let's say we're looking at a referendum, I think we need to have a sort of voice of authority for the Scottish people that will listen to the facts about independence, because we don't have a media, and the media will be giving voters wrong information and scare stories like they did in 2014, and the convention can be debunking all that kind of nonsense so that we know what we're on about. We need to answer questions officially, like this would be what we would do, the currency, borders, Europe, who gets our resources, security, democracy. There needs to be serious debates on policy and stuff, but this has to be done kind of quick because we haven't got an awful lot of time. But if we don't have something that people can look to, it'll be, we've done a lot of the work already. The ALBA party have done things, and other parties, other organisations, but people will always think, well, that's the ALBA party, you're going to say that, or you're the Tory party, you're going to say that. There's always this difference of opinion, but if we had an independence convention that was the authority of the Scottish people, it was a legitimate body, then that could be like a better way of winning a referendum. If it's not a referendum and we'll go some other route, the Independence Convention could be something that actually takes us right the way to independence. I think it's a good thing to support whichever direction we go. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Charlie was our last speaker. We'll therefore now move to a vote. All those in favour of motion number 2 on the agenda, an independence convention, please raise your cards. All those against? I can't see any against. It seems that the motion is passed. I can't see any. I can't see. One. The motion has passed overwhelmingly, conference. Thank you. We now move to motion number 3 on the agenda, which is energy theft. Charlie, you can spring back up again, to be proposed by Charlie Abel and seconded by Gavin Bain. Charlie Abel.
Hello again. Conference. We Scots know only too well about the price of energy, the curse of the prepayment meter, a cold house and a hungry family. We live in a cold, damp climate in this energy-rich country. And it's scandalous that we are paying such high fees despite generating our electricity from renewable resources, unfairly tied to the international gas price by a greedy Westminster establishment. They also charge a VAT on that already extortionate bill. Heating your home is not a luxury in Scotland, it's a necessity. Scotland produces vast energy resources, yet we're receiving no benefit. Like oil before it, devious bad actors are again conspiring to steal our wealth and our resources, resources that belong to the Scottish people. Not content with stealing the oil and our land, they're now after our renewable energy, pushing prices up so high Scotland is drowning in a sea of unjust fuel poverty. Right now, SSEN are building a transmission network south. Starts in the Western Isles through North Scotland, Bewley, Inverness, Blackhillock, New Deer, across North East Scotland to Peterhead. That goes over land on the massive pylons. Then it goes undersea in a great big undersea cable down to Humber, down in England. That's a transmission south. It's not a distribution network for Scotland. And people are literally being kept in the dark. The consultation process has been flawed. Their website has recently changed the infographic with the cable going south, now removed from view. Clearly, it's angering people. Even though the energy being generated on our doorstep in Scotland will see no benefit from this, the unfair transmission charges penalise Scots, and we will pay more for electricity than those in the south because the distance the electricity must travel from where it's generated to where it goes, and also the energy providers pay far more to connect to the grid in Scotland. The pylons for this theft of our resources that travel over our land, some are 200 feet high and blight our countryside, rendering many properties in their path worthless. The jobs and the power generated will do nothing to alleviate the suffering of our rural communities. This is energy theft. We must end the transmission charges, but the only way to secure our resources, the only way to get free, eventually free energy, that's what we'd really like, is through independence and a public energy company. Once we get our independence, the first thing we want to do is fit a massive smart meter, or better still, a prepayment meter, to that cable at Peterhead before it goes down south. We can then use the infrastructure set to funnel our resources away from us to our advantage and give the Scottish people a benefit from their vast resources and a warm home in winter. The resources in the land and sea they travel along belong to us, the Scottish people, and we should be the first to benefit from them. Scotland should take control of all its energy resources. Energy should be cheap or ideally free in Scotland, and we should use these infrastructures set up to steal from us to our advantage and sell other countries our excess energy, provide cheap or free energy, what a dream, for every home and business in Scotland. We can make our power pay the people, and this policy would switch on a powerful economy for a new Scotland. Can you imagine the businesses flocking here to an independent Scotland for free energy? Can you imagine what that would switch on for the economy? So, conference, we recommend that we develop a beneficial energy strategy that ends unfair transmission charges that discourage our renewable energy generators to invest and grow, and ensure that the people of Scotland benefit from our own natural bounty through low-cost energy and obtain a fair return for the export of Scottish resources. Conference, give the power to the people. Support this motion and end energy theft. Thank you.
Charlie, the motion is to be seconded by Gavin Bain. Is Gavin here yet? Welcome, Gavin. And Gavin will be followed by Matthew Love, who will speak in favour of the motion. Welcome, Gavin.
Hello, conference. We've become accustomed to some of the jiggery-pokery you get from the Whitehall Mandarins. They set up an extra regio region to statistically report on all the North Sea revenues so that it could not be associated directly with Scotland. When interconnectors are planned for our electricity supply, none of those land in Scotland. They all connect through different parts of England, to Norway, to France, to our European partners, but they make very sure we don't get a direct connection ourselves. Charlie has described the new supply that bypasses our main population centres to feed England. We do need investment, but that investment needs to be in our interests. We need to benefit the people of Scotland from the natural bounty that we have all around us. We need to take control of our energy strategy. The transmission charges need to be overhauled. We need to address fuel poverty. I don't want to repeat all the excellent points that Charlie has just made, but I strongly support them. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Gavin. I now call Matthew Love to be followed by Abu Merin. Matthew Love has details of expertise as aerospace energy researcher, development engineer and company owner. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Hi, conference. I just wanted to make, I've been thinking about this motion for a little while. I wanted to make some comments on it. I totally back the motion, but I think it has to go further. Not that I want to remit it back. I'm a believer in going with the amendment, talking it out after the fact and improving. So, the figures that have been stated in what we export south of the border are correct, but correct for wind energy. They're not correct for all energy. because what they do is neglect all the other forms of energy that we've already been for many years exporting. That includes hydro and increasingly wave energy. I was at All Energy Conference this week, and there was a lot of greenwash going on, and it was all about that we'll go green within about 5 to 10 years. One thing I'll tell you, the grid capacity on the grid system in the UK couldn't cope if all cars went electric, never mind turning boilers from gas, etc. What does that mean for Scotland? We have lots of energy available. In fact, we're producing more than we need now. However, England needs lots of energy, and they've not got enough energy in their system to support that. What that means long term is that Scotland is going to get more and more wind turbines, offshore and onshore. They're going to block up all the sea lochs to produce wave and tidal power, and they're going to trash the national environment, and they're also going to put in far more grid infrastructure. So that's a vision of the future. So we need to take control of energy now, not even after independence. I hope we get independence damn quick, but we need to take control of energy back now. Otherwise, the natural environment in Scotland will be trashed, and all of our energy is going south or to the continent. So we need to take control of that. Now, within the levers of power, which are limited, that we have in this, we need a strategy group to realise how we can do this. And further to that, we need to know when we get independence, what we are going to do with that, because then you're dealing with very large multinational organisations that will lawyer up and fight us to the hilt. And this is what we need to think about. I support this motion, but there's a lot of work we'll need to go in to think about how we do all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I now call Abu Merin to be followed by Alan Black. Both will speak in favour of the motion. Abu. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, conference. We are still in the morning. Thank you, Chair. Conference, I'm sure that you remember me from the last conference when I was describing about all my electricity problems in my household. I was having a conversation with Alex. Alex said, whenever you speak, speak from your heart. Now, what was happened? My electricity bill was £108, and that went up to £750 a month in that time. Now, once this comes to a theft is not only over there in the bigger scenario, it is in the suppliers as well. Scottish Power, they took that money away. And I went to press, I made a formal complaint, and I brought it forward. And after that, that came back to me, after all this investigation, we made a mistake in the numbers. So they have put it 3 instead of 2. So 1,000 unit number went up, and that is how it was. I pointed it out, I pulled it out, and I have done it. Still now, my electricity bill is higher than what I used to pay. Currently, I am paying £350 a month. We only live 4 in a small house. Now, why all this is happening? Where we are energy-rich country, only Berwickburn, one wind farm, produces more electricity than the Scottish household needs. Now, we are paying the revenue to them. To achieve all these things, to bring back all these things in our hand, our energies, our resources, we do need our independence. So, conference, I urge you, please support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Abba. I now call Alan Black to speak in favour of the motion. Alan's expertise is he's an angry customer, so I'm looking forward to this. To be followed by Morgan Davis, who'll also speak for the motion, who'll be our final speaker. Welcome, Alan.
Hi, thank you.
You're raging. Are you raging?
I'm raging. Good morning, conference. Yes, my name's Alan Black. I'm Perth and Cross Lacu, also known as the land of slippers. I remember when I was a bairn growing up in a small Fife village, we were taught never to challenge your elders and betters because they knew best. To challenge that was a total taboo. And it was perhaps understandable because in a post-war Scotland, that was the attitude that allowed them to survive the conflict. It took me half my life to realise how dangerous that attitude really is. Unquestioning obedience to titles, professions, institutions, companies. Trust in their integrity, their professionalism and their morality. Then came Thatcher, the Big Bang, the long con more like. Any Dick Turpin-like chancellor could rock up, make wild promises about getting a good deal with them. Just pay by direct debit, sign here please. We'll give you a good deal. So like many others, like my friend there before me, I shopped around, got a good energy deal. £100 a month, and it worked great for 6 months. My account stayed in credit. Then came Boris and Ukraine, a war. My energy company disappears, and I get taken over by a big boy, Shell. Within weeks, they contacted me to say my direct debit is going up to £538 a month. So I went from a surplus to a huge deficit due to the energy crisis. How can a corporation posting massive profits be allowed to increase my energy bill to a larger amount than my mortgage ever was? And that increased standing charges by over 100% too. Why? It's the same meter. Because in this wet, windy country that's Scotland, our energy costs are coupled to gas. And this is wrong. The answer is not windfall taxes or taxpayers paying these mobsters on our behalf. It's this simple. Public utilities are the foundation of our society. They should be run for our good and the planet, not the profits of corporations and shareholders. Something fairer like cost of production plus 10% should be our cost of our energy. Not us paying for the infrastructure that they can suck up that energy south to pay their council tax bills. It's Scotland's oil, it's Scotland's energy. We need to stop the thieving, start reclaiming our resources. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I now call our final speaker, Morgan Davies. Morgan.
I'm going to be very brief. I just wanted to share one thing, really. Obviously, this is an issue that's a big issue in East Lothian as well, with the developments of the offshore wind farms in the Firth of Forth and the onshore wind farms. Most of that power from the Firth of Forth is due to go down south. But I just wanted to share a comment that was made to, actually it was made to Lorraine Glass when she was out delivering leaflets and met somebody in the garden. And she was talking to them, and they said to her, you know, first they took our coal, then our oil and gas, and now they are taking our wind power. And I thought, that's a very good quote. And if you can't come up with good quotes yourself, you should steal them from people that give them to you. And we've put that on a leaflet that we're probably going to deliver, and we're going to put it on A-board posters for our next stall. So I just thought I would share that with you, that first they took our coal, then our oil and gas, and now they're taking our wind power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Morgan. There are no cards in against, so can I ask that motion number 3 on energy theft be passed by acclaim? Thank you, delegates. We now move to motion number 4 on roads. Obviously, very huge issue relative to where we are at the moment, to be proposed by James Duncan and seconded by Ian Cameron. James. No problem. We'll clap you on to save the stony silence.
Okay, here goes. Hi, conference. The thing about the roads in the Highlands is that a lot of them, especially over in the west, in the north, and the islands are very narrow and not much better than badly tarred tracks, which really is quite shocking in this day and age. We are sorely in need of modernisation of these roads to help with not only safety on the roads, but tourism, which brings in much needed revenue and work to the whole of the Highlands and Islands. We need these narrow roads in the Highlands and Islands to be brought into the 21st century. The trunk roads most in need of upgrading are the A9, which needs dualling, in my opinion, all the way up to Thurso and Wick. The A9 is now one of the most treacherous roads in Scotland, with more deaths occurring each year. The Scottish Government put average speed cameras up on the A9 to help slow the traffic down, but are now turned off because the cost is too much to run them all the time. These cameras did work, and the death toll did come down when the cameras were operating. But now we read about fatal accidents on the A9 on a regular basis throughout the year. The A96 Inverness to Aberdeen main trunk road is long overdue for dualling, and especially the Nairn bypass. It takes longer to drive through Nairn than it takes to drive from Inverness to Nairn. Then we have the A82, the Inverness to Fort William and Glasgow trunk road. This is another vital link sorely in need of upgrading. In the summertime, we have long tailbacks causing anger and frustration to drivers. This is one of the most scenic routes that the tourists take, which add to the problem of slow-moving traffic. If this road was dualled and better parking areas put in for the tourists, it would make the A82 a much safer road. So I would call on the Scottish Government to implement a Highlands and Islands-wide road infrastructure plan to bring the Highlands and Islands roads up to the 21st century standards. Support the motion, please. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I now call Ian Cameron to second the motion, to be followed by Hector McLeod, who will speak in favour of the motion. Ian Cameron. Oh, it's John. Okay, so...
I'm not actually Ian Cameron, I'm John Henderson, and Jimmy asked me to read out what Ian Cameron was going to say at this stage. Thank you for the opportunity. As convener of the ALBA Transport Working Group, I was delighted when Jimmy Duncan of ALBA Highland Lacu had a roads motion accepted for the spring conference in Inverness and agreed to second it and to speak in support of the motion. Unfortunately, torn quadriceps tendons in my left leg have resulted in having to wear a full-length splint for weeks and therefore unable to attend conference. So I hope that we can send him our best wishes. Yes. The Transport Working Group has just recently been established, but already we are collectively developing an understanding of how we see Scotland's transportation systems being developed as we move towards independence and beyond. We have agreed that we should be working on two platforms stroke timescales. One, developing a long-term strategy or vision for the future of transportation in an independent Scotland. Two, developing short-term priorities and practical solutions, involving pressurising Scottish Government and local authorities to implement improvements. Both are equally important. The long-term strategy is important because we must make it clear to the Scottish people that although an independent Scotland will be a wealthy nation, a country's wealth is only relevant if it is used to raise the living standards of the very poorest among us and to improve the quality of life for the entire population. The Transport Working Group have agreed that it is so important that it should be written into our constitution. It is the right of every citizen in Scotland to have access to an efficient, effective, accessible and affordable transportation system, thus enabling them to have a quality of life on a par with other small European nations. As a National Council delegate, I am hoping to take a motion of this nature to the next ALBA National Council. Jimmy's motion falls into the second category, and this category is of more immediate importance due to the appalling condition of our transport infrastructure throughout Scotland due to decades of neglect and implementation of flawed policies. In the Transport Working Group, we have members from all over Scotland, and we intend to work closely with all LACUs to identify the most pressing transport needs for each area. We will then develop these solutions, form pressure groups in an attempt to deliver these solutions. This is exactly what Jimmy has done for his area, the Highlands and Islands, and I am very pleased to support his motion and would urge conference to do likewise. On behalf of Ian Cameron, thank you.
John, thank you very much for so eloquently giving us Ian's words. Please do send him our very best and let him know we look forward to receiving his motion at National Council. Thank you very much. I now call our final speaker to speak for the motion or noes, Hector MacLeod.
Conference, there's a famous saying here in the Highlands that in the UK you drive on the left of the road, but in the Highlands you drive on what's left of the road. Conference, this motion rightfully calls on the upgrading of the A82, A9 and A96. These roads are vital routes to so many, and with the high amount of tourism in the Highlands, they are seeing big increases in volumes of traffic. But Conference, the motion also touches on single-track roads in rural Highlands, which are in a state that would be more believed in a war-torn country rather than a vibrant, booming tourism region like the Highlands. Conference, last year I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Highland Council. The request was just for Skye and Rasay as it was during the council election, but I have no doubt if anyone was to submit a request in their area, the results will be similar. Conference, the response to my request revealed that in 2016-2017, 1.494 million was spent on Skye and Rasay roads. In 2017-2018, it was 1.448 million. Now, going by these figures and the Bank of England's data of inflation rising an average of 3.2% a year between 2016 and 2022, we should be seeing around 1.8 million being spent to keep our roads maintained. Conference, the figure spent in 2022 was a mere 1.138 million, which by my calculations is in real terms around a 24% cut in our roads maintenance budget. And Conference, the results of these cuts can be seen, firstly, by just using your eyes and seeing the state of the roads, but secondly, from a second question in the Freedom of Information request. This response revealed in 2013 to 2016, the number of claims by Skye and Rasay road users for damages to our vehicles due to road conditions submitted to Highland Council was an average 7 per year. In 2017, it jumped to 26, and in 2022, it was a staggering 84. That's a 223% rise in just 5 years. Conference, all of this shows that while cuts continue being made to road maintenance budgets, it is again us that's suffering with punctured tyres, damaged wheels, broken suspensions, etc. And I fear the day that these broken rural roads become the cause of a fatality. Conference, in rural Scotland, driving these roads is a necessity. Public transport is not always available. We need to make our roads safe and affordable to travel on without fear of doing costly damage to our vehicles, or worse, putting ours and other lives at risk. So, Conference, I ask you to please support this motion to tell the Government and local council that we need our roads brought up to a 21st century safe standard, and the money required for these improvements must be found. Conference, support the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Hector. There are no cards in against, so can I please ask delegates that motion number 4 or noes be passed by acclaim. Before we move to our final motion of this afternoon, before we hear from our Deputy Leader, a wee reminder of the ALBA youth stall that's outside, and there's a quiz, if you visited it, about what the first jobs of some of us are. Now, I understand that, well, somebody texted me to ask me what my first job was, so I expect that might be one of the questions. I suspect Alex's as well, I think Corey and indeed Kenny. So let's see how well you do in that quiz. I'm convinced you won't get mine. I don't know if they'll get yours, Alex, if it's not on Wikipedia. But you may remember, just as we're waiting for our next speaker, last autumn conference, I think it was the first one in Greenock, ALBA Youth led brilliantly by Christina Henry, had a stall where you had to guess the baby photographs. And by some real weird, I can't think why, Alex thought my photo was his. To his own niece, and she's like, Uncle Alec, why don't you know what you look like when you were a child? Anyway, at least he managed to lead us to a referendum, so he's got some things in his favour. Right, all of that being said, I'm now going to call the very wonderful Christina Henry to lead us to propose the next motion on student support, to be seconded by Jackie Bister. Tina, where are you? Imagine having a lead-in like that and not being here. Now, I know where she is, because she had some very important post-office duties, but she's being escorted in. Welcome, Tina. Rising applause for Tina. I plugged your stall. I did the quiz. Done it all, madam.
Thank you very much. Take a breather. Whew. So, thank you, Tasmina, for the plug. First of all, for our quiz, you're all welcome to come and take part. So at ALBA Youth, we're trying to get involved in the party with fun things like the quiz, but also bringing really important motions forward. And this motion is one that we're really passionate about. So, as you're all aware, doom and gloom, we are facing a cost of living crisis, and that's affecting everybody across the board. So this doesn't discriminate. It affects our eldest, it affects our youngest, and this is what I want to highlight in this speech, that it's also affecting our students. And I've just ran, so whew, not as young as I used to be. So, as a very wise man, a party leader, once said, the rocks will melt before the sun, before people to pay tuition in Scotland. And free tuition is crucial. Current discussion around revising this and reversing it, topic for another day. But if we don't support our students to be able to afford day-to-day living, this free tuition is almost wasted, because those who need it most aren't able to get to uni because they may have the free tuition, but they can't afford to live day-to-day. So students, I'm sure you're aware, are able to apply through SAS for a student loan, and this supports them each year of their studies. Now, right now, I did a bit of research, a few years since I was at uni, although back now, but that's also another story. The maximum is around £8,000 for the year, but if your family income is over £34,000, then you only get up to £6,000. Now, it's all very complicated, and this doesn't actually take into effect single parent families, because I've got a friend trying to get to university and they're having really difficulty working out how they're going to be able to afford it. So this payment is to last the full year. Now, if we consider rent increases, the increase in food cost, increase in energy bills, this doesn't actually go very far. My brother a few years ago was in first year university, and his maximum SAS payment would not even cover his university accommodation. So we're forgetting food, we're forgetting travel for university, we're forgetting everything else. He couldn't even pay for his university accommodation, which I think is abysmal. How are we supposed to support our students if they can't even afford the university accommodation with the loan that they're given? Now, he was fortunate, he had support from his family. But what happens for those, many of those who do not have this luxury? Is this something we want to push in Scotland, that our students can't afford to eat, can't afford to travel, can't afford to actually be at university? So one solution to this, heard it so many times, get a student job, easy, sorted. But this comes with its own challenges. For instance, an expectation to work whenever, no flexibility a lot of employers have, so students are trying to go to class but they're expected to work. Also an expectation to work all holidays. I remember doing multiple job interviews at university and they wanted you to work Christmas, New Year, Easter, February break. When do you see your family? When do you get to go home? When do you get to complete assignments or study? When do you get any downtime? Now, many people head to university when they're 17, 18, and at this age they're often leaving home for the first time. So this comes with its own stressors. They're having to manage a very, very tight budget, but throw a job in the mix and you've got a further stressor. Now, it wouldn't be a speech from me if it wasn't considering the mental health implications of this. So youth mental health services for young people and young adults are seeing an increase in referrals, and this was before the pandemic, but it's even been exacerbated since. So then, if we're not supporting our students, what do we have? We have students not able to complete their studies. We then have crucial jobs not being filled. We then have even more pressure on our health services, which are already at breaking point, not to mention the generational impact of mental health. But almost most importantly, students are facing challenges to their mental health, which they shouldn't need to. So arguably, we're failing our students right now. Now, if we want to have a next generation of professionals teaching our children, saving lives in the mental health services and in the health services, we must support our students. If we want to maintain accessible higher education for all, no matter the background, we must support our students. And if we want to look after the mental health of our young people, limit the pressures on services, we must support our students. So this is why, Conference, I urge you to support the motion. Let us show that we are a party supporting all in Scotland, and students included. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was a tour de force, and you'll understand why she's out of breath. She had to run a very important errand to the post office, something which you can look forward to hearing all about a bit later on this afternoon. And I call Jackie Bister to second the motion, who will be followed by a final speaker, Mercy Kamanya, who will speak in favour of the motion. Welcome to our membership convener, Jackie Bister.
Hello, Conference. I don't think I was the original designated seconder, but I'm delighted to do that. I'm very much in support of this motion. I'm coming at it from a slightly the opposite side to Christina there, as a college lecturer. And one thing I would like to say is that not all students are at university, and some are at college, and not all courses that they're doing qualify even for student loans. I think it's very important to recognise that too. So in the college sector, we serve a demographic of students that is disproportionately from backgrounds of multiple deprivation. We have a disproportionate number of people who are care experienced, or in some cases still in the care system with all the lack of control that implies. We have a disproportionate number of students from marginalised groups in Scottish society. And I can see from my job as a lecturer working with large numbers of students every year that it's routine for us to see students not able to come in for classes because they can't afford the bus fare. It's routine for us to see students coming into class straight from the night shift, unable to learn, because they haven't slept all night. It's increasingly routine, especially this year, to see students coming in to work in or to just to be in the library because it's too cold to be at home and they can't put their heating on. So what we're seeing is students who, for whom, whatever their course they're doing at college, whether it be a higher education course or a further education course, that is their route from often difficult circumstances into either university or directly into work. And we're seeing students either not able to complete their course because of financial stresses, or not able to do as well in their course as they would have otherwise. So that's why I wholeheartedly ask you to support this motion that all of our students should be supported adequately to make the very best of their lives and their education. Thank you.
And I call our final speaker to speak in favour of the motion, Mercy Kamanya. Mercy?
Welcome. Thank you. Hello, hi, thank you. Conference, I'm speaking as someone who have benefited from education system in this country. A majority of people from migrant countries who come from this country, they come and benefit a lot because where we come from, developing world, we don't have access to education, especially for girls, especially those who come from areas that are semi-arid and they are riddled with poverty. So I am a single mother and I've got 2 children. If I did not have any access to that education, I would not have been able to even have my children go to university. And me, myself, I've benefited a lot. Since I came to this country, I've benefited a lot from the education system in this country. And it is not possible for us to be able to survive. Immigrants have come here and they have changed the education system in the UK, especially in Scotland. The value of education has gone up since our children have joined the schools. So denying them that opportunity for them to study, and majority of them, they come from very deprived area, under the very difficult circumstances, terrifying journeys, escaping violence, and running away from their country, coming here with nothing. And the Home Office normally keeps them in a limbo maybe for years and years. And during that period of time, they're not allowed to take any job. So you find the families that came here when they were 20s or 30s, by the time they got the immigration system, the papers, they are already 45 years. So for them now to get a job in this country, they normally say, where is your experience, where is your education? So majority of the people will be very deprived and we shall become defranchised. We shall not be able to contribute into the economy and the system of this country. So I am here speaking in support of this motion to say that we cannot be able to take away education system for those people who didn't need it. So we have to fight and keep the education free for our children so that we can be able to make this country to be a country that is led by children that have education. We don't want to have literacy levels in our neighborhood. We want our children to grow in confidence with knowledge, and they have been taught and have learned, and knowing that the government of this country have been able to support that. And for that reason, I am going to call upon every other person to be able to understand that until Scotland goes to independence, we shall not be able to make our decisions the right way we need to do. So I want us to be able to go out there and fight and fight and fight. And we say that we want independence to be sustained and to be achieved, so that we can be able now to run this country properly, put the system that we want, and we manage our resources. Thank you very much. I'm in support of the motion.
Thank you very much indeed. Mercy, there are no cards in against. Therefore, can I ask that motion number 5 on the agenda on student support be passed by acclaim? Now we shall dim the lights to watch a video.
Legally, historically, politically, the people of Scotland are sovereign, not a UK court or a UK Parliament. That has been part of our constitutional history, as other members have mentioned. I'll support this motion, but questions need to be answered by the members in the SNP. When it is defeated, when will you actually stand up and take powers back for the people of Scotland and ensure that it's Scottish sovereignty, Scottish democracy that rules, not the diktat of a Tory government further impoverishing the people of Scotland? We require to give people hope, not hope of one more mandate, one more heave. Pete Bishop will assure us that Boris Johnson will blink, Rishi Sunak will blink. No, they won't. We require to take the power into our own hands. So as well as the poor who are being impoverished, we now have a middle class that are being impoverished. All at the same time, let's remember, Brexit and COVID, that the other side and the government have said have caused difficulties and plead as the excuse for many, has created not just millionaires and billionaires. People, especially on the other benches and indeed in the House of Lords, have benefited significantly from decisions that were political choices that have impacted upon not just the poorest, but upon the middle class. What I want to consider is where that wealth is coming from and to whom it is largely going, because the situation remains that Scotland is energy rich, and yet the majority of Scots are going to find themselves fuel poor. The oil and gas wealth that we were told in 2014 was all but gone and simply a burden upon poor Scotland if we went independent is now crux and being used with great respect by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Being added to that is the situation of offshore wind. And yet at the same time, fuel poverty still continues to scar Scotland, not just rural but urban areas. Thirdly, we should support the call for a plebiscite election, one that could be triggered next October and deliver us our referendum, the no ifs, no buts referendum that we were promised by members on the SNP benches. That can be achieved by collapsing the Scottish Parliament. A member of the SNP has already set out a way there. That could be done and could deliver the referendum that the people of Scotland were promised by the First Minister and others that would happen in October of next year. That must be done.
And to introduce our fantastic Deputy Leader, please welcome Party Leader Alex Salmond.
Delegates, about a decade ago, Joe Fraser died, smoking Joe Fraser. And the press went to his long-time friend, sometimes opponent of him, who had 3 epic struggles in the boxing ring, Muhammad Ali, for a quote. And what Ali said was, when the last trump sounds, and I go to fight with God's army, then the person I want standing by my side is smoking Joe Fraser. The delegates, I've known Kenny McCaskill a long time. Long enough to know, for those who are taking part in the ALBA youth quiz, that when you're asked his first job, you should think cold and you should think storage. I've known Kenny since he led the campaign against the poll tax. I've watched Kenny lead the campaign currently against the extortion of the poor and prepayment meters. I've never known anyone in Scottish politics who has been more steadfast, a politician with more courage or campaigning vigour than Kenny McCaskill. And as a word to the energy giants, if I were you, I would stop extorting the poor forthwith with prepayment meters, because McCaskill has your number. So delegates, when the trump sounds for independence and we go into the independence battle, then the person I want standing by my side is our Deputy Leader of ALBA, Kenny McCaskill.
Aye, 5 years loading Findus fish fingers and Lang's made ice cream every summer. See where it gets you. Can I start with some of the procedural matters? Because obviously Neil and I operate as a tag team in the Westminster ring, one in, one out. But when we're out, there's lots of work to be done. And obviously a question was raised with the General Secretary about finance, and he correctly answered it, and it was correct to ask him. It is important. These things are not simply technical. I do chair, as he said, the Finance and Audit Committee. We did meet earlier this week. We did question him. We did peruse the accounts. We are satisfied. There is no camper van in the accounts or anywhere else, nor will there be, though I do know that some people think it would be handy given the price of hotels, I'm told, this weekend in Inverness. But we can be light-hearted and jocular about that, but it's important, because I was a National Treasurer of the SNP. Many of us were in the SNP. We left the SNP because of policies, some of which were frankly wrong, if not perverse, some of which they were bereft of, but were core to the party and the reason that we had joined. But it was more than simply policies. It was about probity, because let me be quite clear, it is appropriate for Fiona and any other member of ALBA to question the Executive, the General Secretary and anybody else about our finance. And also that any party, especially a government party, should not only be seeking to get Scotland's constitutional future correct, but they should be ensuring that they stand by the tenor of their own constitution. Something is fundamentally wrong, not only in policies, but in probity in the government party of Scotland. But there's also an arrogance. Last week, I got an email in from a magazine. They were asking for 700 words for a column. Would I write one? And I said, well, I'm happy to. And they told me, the editor, he said he had been asking the SNP, but they had been blocked. Now, this is a magazine that does in rotation, Labour, Tories, Liberal Democrats. He said since the internal election for the new First Minister, some SNP members individually had broken ranks, but he had had no cooperation from the SNP. This wasn't some of the obscure left-wing magazines that I write for, or Declassified UK that the SNP run from. This, ladies and gentlemen, was fishing news. Fishing news. Not angling, but fishing. Now, you think about the history of the SNP and indeed of the nationalist movement, how important the fishing industry in the North East and the North of Scotland was, and the Scottish Government Party doesn't seem to think it's worth providing 700 words for them. Well, I was happy to oblige, because I pointed out in my column, and without prejudging the debate that we're going to be having on HPMAs, I pointed out that I walk my dog round Dunbar Harbour quite often. And Dunbar Harbour, late at night, they're unloading the boats and they're preparing them for the following day. And it's the same in Port Seton and Cockenzie. It's not the glory days of when Fisher Row was renowned across the country, when Dunbar, Port Seton and Cockenzie were bustling ports, but these men and women, they work hard. The industry's changed. There's new challenges because I've had to intervene to hold the jerseys, because as they lay the cabling and do the sonar work for the offshore wind, it's affecting those who work in fishing. They've got rights as well, despite the fact that we do need this offshore wealth, as I'll come on to. And also remember the history of Scottish fishing, and I've written about that, because not only did I see it now in Dunbar, but I used to go up every summer, as I said to the editor, to the Western Isles. You can deduce from my name where my father's parents came from. And it grieves me when I see this flight of Stornoway. A marina is no alternative for what was a bustling fishing port and a bustling fishing community. And it wasn't just Stornoway. Wee villages in Lewis and Harris had their own ports and their own ships that went out sailing from them. But of course, what happened? The world did change in many ways. We joined the then common market. Spanish trawlers and others came into the sea lochs. They scooped out with nets that were illegal. They destroyed the fishing grounds. Our people's rights were sold out by the British government, not simply taken by Brussels. And that continued, because I can remember when the Klondikers came in and fishermen in Ullapool were flying the flag of Canada, because Canada was standing up for its fishing industries when the UK was neglecting them and selling them out. But at that time, we had no Scottish Parliament. Had we had a Scottish Parliament, we said we would never have allowed our fishing rights to be sold out as they were to the common market. When the Klondikers were coming in, we'd have said no Scottish Parliament. We'd have allowed the Klondikers in with impunity and not stand up for the Scottish fishing industry. What have we got now? Not only will they not contribute 700 words once a quarter or even once a month to fishing news, they won't stand up in the danger to the communities that are left that have been bereft in Lewis, Harris and elsewhere across the coasts of mainland Scotland. The danger is this isn't being done by Brussels. It's not being done by Westminster. It's being done by the SNP Green Coalition because it's part of the Butte House Agreement. Because it's part of the Butte House Agreement, the same as we had to soak up what Brussels imposed upon us, we've got to soak up what Rollner Slater and the Greens want to damage the existing communities. We've been working away, and Neil referred to the Valaris 121, this offshore supply ship for the offshore industry, where a lad from Wales sadly lost his life. I've been working closely with the RMT, a union that are friends to this party, as we know, and who we should never forget in their time of need, which is why I'm delighted that Neil, I and others have been supporting them in their industrial action that is only right, because it's not simply about wages. It's also about health and safety. When you see the cuts are coming to the rail network, as somebody who uses it regularly going up in the road, it's worrying and it's frightening. But I got a meeting for myself and RMT representatives with the lead at the Crown Office, that was kindly provided by the Lord Advocate, with the head of health and safety and who deals with the fatal accident units. And I was very happy to hear that investigations are ongoing. You'll remember last time, because this was not attached to an offshore turbine, it was a supply ship, the legislation that covers oil and gas supply doesn't apply. And accordingly, when the man's life was lost in a tragedy that raised suspicions for Police Scotland, they thought something should be done. But health and safety don't really have the powers. The powers, as I told you last time, the powers rest with the country that is the flag of convenience, frankly, for the ship upon which he was operating. That gentleman who died was on a ship 100 miles off Aberdeen heading for Dundee. but it was flagged by Liberia. Had it not been Liberia, it might have been Panama or the Cayman Islands, as many of them are. So the lead investigation is not health and safety or the Crown. The lead investigation is Liberia. And I was interested to hear in the discussion with the very able, and to be fair to them, I've got no criticism of what Crown are doing within the limited powers they have. They advised me there had been a Teams meeting in which Liberia had participated from Houston, to which I had to caveat, Texas, not Renfrewshire, to which they said, of course. It's not even that Liberia attends itself. It sends attorneys, not even physically, but through the medium of Teams, from the Lone Star State to investigate the death of a worker on a Scottish offshore rig. That is simply unacceptable. I don't criticise Police Scotland or the Crown, but as with a column in Fishing News, the Scottish Government and the SNP are sadly absent. There's another update to make because despite that tragedy, as I pointed out in the papers that you've seen about our wealth and that Neil again correctly referred to, we're sending 35 terawatts south. I think the last occasion I had to tell you that I had to look up what a terawatt was. 1 billion kilowatts. And we'll be sending 124 billion kilowatts south come 2030. And what are we getting for it? As Neil said, zero, zip, nothing. Of course, the SNP pledged us supply chain jobs. Well, I can say in East Lothian, where it's coming ashore at Cockenzie and indeed at Torness because of connections to the national grid, the supply chain jobs stand at the moment at the precise total of zero. I asked Alan Brown, who's a very friendly guy, the SNP member for Kilmarnock, and who actually is very knowledgeable about energy and thinks I'm just too harsh on the Scottish Government, how many supply chain jobs he's had in Kilmarnock. He hasn't answered me, so I assume it's zero. Of course, there's the odd one here or there. We hear about announcements coming from Japan, and I very much welcome that. But every estuary in Scotland should be building these turbines, not having the nonsense that the closest we're going to get to is probably 20 or so being built up in Nig, and then we'll be assembling them in Leith. And that's another sham, because we're told that the reason that they restricted the auction that I told a few conferences back where most people who hold an auction put a floor price, the SNP put a cap, which is why we got 700 million that they lauded, the former First Minister, and the New Yorkers 4 weeks later got $4.3 billion for 1/4 of what we sold for £700 million. Ireland's actually going through an auction at the moment. The Consul General tells me they won't be imposing a cap on the stuff that's going to go off Kildare, Galway or wherever else. So there's huge wealth out there that we are simply not accessing. There was a slight error in the figures that we put out, and that's why if you are looking or refer to papers, please look at the updated papers that Robert Reid will have got on site, because it wasn't our error, it was an error from the House of Commons Library. It transposed figures and it slightly overestimated the value. But fear not, the value in current terms, as at 2030, of that 124 billion kilowatts will be almost £11 billion. That's at current terms. What will it be in 2030 if we continue on the path of the inflation that we currently get? What will it be in 2030 as energy prices continue to rise for fossil fuels, despite them using our assets and exploiting them as fast as they possibly can? And let's also remember, even that 11 billion, that's on an annual and repeating basis. And that's predicated on what we anticipate currently coming in, when we all know that even the current Scotland auction, there's much, much more. We have the huge resource, probably the largest resource of any single country in the European Union for on and offshore wind, and we should be exploiting it, and our people are getting nothing. Which leads me to the latest scandal. Alec correctly mentioned the scandal of people's doors basically being kicked in
to have smart meters. Modern IT is supposed to liberate you. Looking back at the first point about the finances, I recall when I was SNP Treasurer, Joan Knott, the lovely Joan Knott that many will remember, had to take a taxi along at the end of the month to get me to sign the cheque to pay the staff wages. Now, of course, it's all done electronically. There's IT systems and transfers. That saves the party a taxi fee. It makes life easier. But new technology is supposed to benefit us and enhance us. And yet a smart meter being imposed upon your house when you've got no funds and no ability to pay isn't making life easier. It is that euphemism of people having self-disconnection, not switching on. Nobody switched them off. No ogre in a power company shut them down. No heartless Tory minister failed to provide them the funds. What happened was they didn't have the money, they couldn't afford the bill, and they simply couldn't put it on. That was shameful. But let me tell you about the latest scam and shame that you'll be reading about and hopefully seeing on STV in coming days or weeks. We all know that it was dreadful for people when they looked at rising electricity and gas prices. But they didn't rise half as fast as those who were having to use what's known as alternative fuels, because those who were having to use heating oil or were having to get in LNG or other Calor gas type projects, they realised that actually the rise in gas and electricity was small beer in comparison to what they were facing. And so after great pressure, after all the pressure that was put on myself and energy campaigners, eventually in December of 2022, they announced they were going to make a payment of £200, the alternative fuel payment. The £200 of alternative fuel payment was paid out in February of 2023. Probably the coldest, most inclement month of the year in Scotland and all these northern parts of Scotland, because that's where I act here. How did they pay it out? Well, at that stage, you didn't write in to try and make sure they got it out because they knew they had been belated. People were freezing and they had to do something. They supplied the energy companies with the meter documentation that they had. They provided that to them and they paid out. Now, that wasn't those who had electricity heating. It was those who basically had an electricity supply. The odd person who didn't perhaps have the electricity supply from the grid, who perhaps had their own generator, they actually had to apply themselves, and they did have to make a declaration that it was their principal home. For everybody else, it went to British Gas, it went to SSE, it went to all of them. It didn't say only pay those who it's their principal home. They just said pay these people. That was what happened in off-gas grid properties. Now, off-gas grid in Scotland, we know, those areas that are off-gas grid are the areas with the highest rates of fuel poverty. The off-gas grid areas in Scotland are the likes of Orkney, Shetland, the Western Isles, Highlands, Moray, Argyll and Bute, Dumfries and Galloway. Never mind those in the urban areas in Glasgow and Dundee and multi-storey flats, because you can't get the gas into the multi-storey flat. But in the off-gas grid areas, the energy companies were directed to pay out. But as well as being the areas with the highest fuel poverty, they're the areas with the highest concentration of second home ownership. They're the areas with the highest concentration of vacant properties. So we had the perversity that the people were huddling at home, unable to heat their bills. But those who had a holiday home and maybe lived either in the Central Belt or down in Surrey or the south of England, they got bunged £200 to their account. The areas with the highest fuel poverty, the areas with the highest second home ownership, saw money go willy-nilly that should have been targeted to the locals that need it, but instead saw it go across the board to those in holiday homes at a time of year when they wouldn't even have been there. That is a shameful error. That's why it all comes back to the campaign for independence. These mistakes are being made. Sadly, having a Scottish Parliament hasn't allowed us to ensure that mistakes aren't continued to be made because of the Butte House Agreement and the failures. But at the end of the day, without independence, you can't do anything. We require independence to be able to change these things that are coming fundamentally from London, but equally being added to by insanity and perversity in the Scottish Government. It's for that reason that we continue the battle, as Neil said, in Westminster, but equally, when we're not in the ring in Westminster, we're dodging around the communities in Scotland, we're networking people, making contacts, and continuing that push for independence.
Excuse me. Thank you very much indeed, Kenny. And that takes us to lunchtime. Oh, good. I heard somebody say in the front row. Don't know who that was. Lunchtime, but our two fringe